Welcome to Caldwell County Today. I'm Paige Counts, Public Information Officer for Caldwell County. Joining me today is Kimberly Setzer from Amorem. Welcome, Kimberly.
Thank you.
Today we're here to talk about Children's Grief Camp. But I think first let's talk a little bit about children and grief.
Okay.
Can you tell me, children don't grieve like adults?
Correct.
So how do children grieve, just in general, broad strokes?
Okay. So children certainly grieve differently than adults. And some of the ways that they share their grief is through play, through activities, whether it be play therapy, whether it be participating in sports. We'll see elements of grief come out through that. So we have to put children in perspective to their developmental stages. And so a lot of times children don't have education or language knowledge to be able to share with us how they're feeling or to even truly be able to understand death or loss. So a lot of what we do with children is do grief education about what is death, what is loss. Not all grief comes from a death loss. There's some major changes in our life that may generate some pretty intense grief as well. And so a lot of the work that we do with children is that we help them understand what they're dealing with, why this is so hard, why this is so confusing. On the opposite side, sometimes children do better with grief than we do as adults. They don't overcomplicate it as we do. Children also live their lives based on facts, and they don't always turn fact into emotion as we do as adults. And so what we do is we help them try to find those connections and those correlations.
And Children's Grief Camp is one way you connect children with their peers who are also grieving and to Ashwood. So talk a little bit about what Grief Camp is.
Okay, so our Good Mourning Children's Grief Camp is just that. It's mourning. And we try to put a positive spin on that, of course, especially for children, but just to acknowledge that mourning is normal whenever we have a big loss or a big change. And so, of course, we do want to expose children to other children that are grieving. We hear almost every year at our grief camp a child or many children say, I didn't know that there were other children going through this. So if you think about children, the majority of their life is taken in by grade level to grade level, which is a certain makeup of their peers. So they may be the only child in that classroom or that grade level, even depending on the size of that school, who has lost a parent, a grandparent, a sibling, a friend. And they may have the perception that they're the only person going through this because they don't know anyone else going through this. So it's really powerful for children to be able to see there are other children who are grieving and there are other children going through very similar things that they're going through. It's also helpful for adults. That's why we have support groups for adults as well. But it's especially powerful for children because they truly don't grasp there are other people going through very similar things until they meet those people.
Right. Who can attend Grief Camp?
So Grief Camp, of course, is through Amorem, but it is open to anybody in the community that has had a loss. So Grief Camp specifically is for children ages 6 to 12. We do want the children to be age 6 because there are activities where they do have a little bit of reading or maybe some writing. So some language skills are really needed for those activities. But we do ages 6 to 12. We divide into smaller groups. Children cope with grief and understand grief very differently based on what developmental stage they're at. So we try to put children with peers that are of their same developmental stage, but also with the same capacity to share in language. And the activities for the younger children and the older children are very different.
Talk to me a little bit about the activities.
Okay, so we try to do a variety of activities. This year we're in the process of finalizing our curriculum. We do a lot of kind of artwork. We know that expressive arts is really beneficial for children because they do have limited language skills. One of the activities that we do, we call the 2 hands. In one hand, children can decorate it however they want to, but a lot of them will write, some of them will draw, but they will put in one hand the things that they can hold on to that's connected to their special person, is what we call it, their loved one that has passed away. And then on the other hand, they write or draw pictures of, or some way to symbolize things that they can let go of. So some examples of that would be people want to hold on to the memories. They want to hold on to maybe some actual tangible items that they have been given or that they received from that person. Some things that they may want to let go of, maybe pain or bad memories. Scary dreams is another example. So that's just one example of an activity that we'll do. And you'll actually see on our flyer as well, there are two hands there to represent that. So we also do several activities that are focused on emotion and learning about emotions or feelings. What we try to do is do activities that will help process grief and loss at the time of the camp. But these are all things that the children will take with them, and it will continue to spur those thoughts or that processing. So of course, camp is a one-day event, but we know that we're not going to resolve grief in one day. So we try to give some activities that children can continue to engage in. One of those is a memories jar. So in the memories jar, we talk about emotions, and we may, children pick out their own key, so to speak. So they may think that pink represents happy memories. They may think that green represents sad memories. And so they will write out memories on different slips of color. And of course, they get to take a stack of slips home with them so they can continue to add to their memory jar. So those are just two examples of some of the activities that we utilize with children to help them understand, but also process their grief.
And we're talking a lot about processing grief, and the question that comes to mind is super basic. Is grief camp fun? I mean, are there activities that are just for fun?
Absolutely. We try to have a good balance. We all know that grief work is heavy and it's hard, and we want children to still have fun together. And that's why we don't just sit together and talk about grief all day. We do have time for breaks. It's heavy for the children. It's heavy for the adults working camp. We have staff members, we have adult volunteers, we have teen volunteers, our Volunteens program, who all work together to support grief camp. And so it's heavy for all of us. And so we certainly take those breaks. We have snacks, we have food. We also just have some time for play and fun.
And another question that comes to mind is, what about the adults in these children's lives? What role do they play? I mean, I know you bring your kid and you drop them off, but is there something special for them as well?
Absolutely. So one thing that we do with grief camp is towards the end of our camp, we have what we call a parent meeting. And that is for any parent, grandparent, guardian that are responsible for these children. So you may be the primary guardian, the primary parent. And so what we do is we talk with those folks too about grief and loss. We talk about how to support grieving children, what are the resources in our community to help children that are grieving, but also how do we help you. So it's pretty unusual that we would have a child who's grieving, but also their parent or grandparent or guardian wouldn't be grieving. So more often than not are typically these families are grieving. We also know that this camp specifically is for children ages 6 to 12. We know that there are people ages 13 to 18 that are also grieving, and we have other resources available for those individuals. But for this camp, it's specifically geared towards children ages 6 to 12. So we, of course, want to equip those adults with what do we do to support these children.
Right, because one day and you feel like they are making progress, and then if that suddenly stops after that one day, it makes it very difficult.
Absolutely.
And you've mentioned volunteers, and staff members. You do have folks who are trained that work grief camp. Talk about your volunteers and your staff members a little bit.
So of course this event specifically is through Amorem, and it's through our grief support services program. But our grief camp committee and the folks that staff grief camp are sometimes social workers, nurses, administrative staff who work all throughout our organization. Grief camp takes a lot of labor hours. It takes a lot of planning, a lot of organizing, and so there's so many people who are involved in this. We also have our counselors and our grief support specialists, our grief resource specialists will all be at camp. All of those are resources to these children, but we do some additional training for volunteers and volunteers who will be working specifically in grief camp as well. And
this year, I don't know if you've done this in the past or if this is new, but you're going to do 3 grief camps.
This is not new.
Not new, okay. So 3 grief camps, one at each location. Talk about locations and dates for each camp.
Okay, so we're going to start in Boone up in the high country this year. That camp will be on July the 25th. We are going to do something a little different this year. What is different is that we're going to have drop off from 7 to 8 a.m. So hopefully more parents, guardians, grandparents can bring their children. We know a lot of times we've gotten a lot of feedback that it's hard during the work day. So the other thing that we're going to do is we're going to have camp this summer. We usually do it either in the spring or the fall. We're going to just pilot it this summer, see how it goes, see if that works better for folks. And we're going to have drop off from 7 to 8 and then pick up from 5 to 6. So hopefully that will really help parents and guardians who work full time. We're going to have a full day of activities, a full day of fun. That'll be in Boone on July 25th. We'll be at our Valdese campus August 1st and our Hudson campus August the 8th.
So 3 different locations. Do you have to live in Watauga County to go to the Boone campus?
Absolutely not. No. So we just know that those are our 3 primary service areas. So we're hosting camp at our Amorem office locations where we just have the most space and we can accommodate for more people. But if you live in Caldwell County but the August 8th date does not work, you are welcome to come to the Burke County or the Watauga County location on a different day.
And since this lasts all day long, what about lunch?
Lunch will be provided. Absolutely. We all need lunch that day.
That's right. I mean, everybody needs lunch. How do parents enroll their children?
Okay, great question. So you can actually go to our website for more information, amoremsupport.org. You, of course, at any time can call our office, 828-754-0101, or you can also email us. So my email address is ksetzer@amoremsupport.org.
So lots of ways to connect. And again, let's just briefly, it's for children who have lost someone special in their lives.
Absolutely.
And that's a broad definition.
It is. It is. We do, our camp is specific to children who have to experience a loss through death. I know that's not true of all camps, but that is kind of our target for this camp. But it doesn't have to be a specific person. So it doesn't have to be a parent, doesn't have to be a grandparent, doesn't have to be a sibling. It could even be a friend. So we know that children and adults who lose friends really struggle with grief as well. So it doesn't have to be a specific person or a specific relationship, but it does have to be the death of a friend or a close relative.
And as I'm looking through, there is an application for parents to fill out, and they send that to you. What is the cost for grief camp?
So camp is shared of no cost to participants. We do need to have the prior registration, and that is just simply so we know how many to prepare for. So right now there is not a cap to the number of children that we will take for camp, but we do have to have pre-registration completed, and we need that at least 3 days before that camp site. So 3 days before the Boone camp if you're coming to the Boone camp. So we do have a little leeway there, but we do need to pre-register children just so we can prepare for everyone that's coming.
You want to make sure you have enough supplies for everybody.
That's right.
All those important things.
Absolutely.
And it's okay for siblings to come.
Right, absolutely, yeah. So one thing that we do is we see sometimes that children do really well with their siblings, or they need to be in separate groups, and we will accommodate for that either way. Sometimes siblings want to be together in the morning, and then they get a little more comfortable, and they're comfortable separating in the afternoon, but we will accommodate to each child or each sibling group whatever needs to happen for them.
What is the typical size of a grief camp group?
Oh wow, it varies for sure. We've had some very small camps before where we have 2 or 3, and then we've had up to 30 at a time. So we're open to whatever size the camp turns out to be. Of course, we want to have as many children as possible because our goal is to help as many children as possible. But as long as we have 2 or 3, camp will go on. But we hope for more because we know the need is out there.
Kimberly, what have I forgotten? I feel like I've asked you a whole lot of questions, but I feel like there might be something else that we need to talk about.
I don't think that we've forgotten anything, but I think one thing that I will add is, for a lot of people, grief camp sounds a little intimidating. It sounds a little heavy, but it truly is a good balance of the day. The workers, the volunteers, the staff that are there are excited to work with these children and excited to help children with a very difficult topic of grief, but it is fun. But there is space to share and to be sad if children want to be sad. And what we really want to convey to these children is that wherever you are in your grief process is okay, and there is support out there, and that you 100% are not the only person grieving. And so I just encourage folks that are watching this or that may express some interest in grief camp to know that there really will be a balance and it won't be all heavy.
And if you know a child who's grieving, tell their guardian about this.
Absolutely.
Share the information because it really is a good thing.
Yes.
Kimberly, thank you for being with me today.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for watching Caldwell County Today.